Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate, just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
I try to make myself feel better by telling myself it's not a Southern accent thing, it's an American accent thing. Like the idea that any thick regional American accent can sound kind of dumb, not just this one, you know? Like if you go to the doctor to get some test results back, yeah, you don't want this accent from the doctor. I know, you don't, right? You don't. But you also don't want some meatball from the Bronx, you know, like, listen, it is what it is, you got stage 4 cancer, what are you going to do? No, what are you going to do? I'll tell you what you're going to do. You're going to take your fucking chemo. You're going to take your radiation. You're going to kick cancer's ass. Actually, I didn't want a Bronx doctor. I take that back. That sounds pretty inspiring, actually.
Good morning. It's Friday, Fireman Friday, March the 14th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the headlines, patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, and 3,000 degrees. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Side of the street. Allora, via. sunny side of the street. I used to walk in the shade with those blues on parade. But I'm not afraid. This world will go if I never ever sang. I'd be just Rockefeller. So I set my feet on the sunny side of the street. I used to walk in the shade with those blues on parade. But I'm not afraid. This world was over. If I never ever sang, I'd be rich as Rockefeller. Gold I set my feet on the sunny side. The sunny side of the street. Oh yeah!
Thank you. And now, the political corner.
This is Mr. Montgomery. I met him a few weeks ago in New York.
Oh, how are you? You live here?
Yes.
Well, maybe you know what a zombie is.
When a person dies and is buried, it seems there are certain voodoo priests who have the power to bring him back to life.
How horrible.
It's worse than horrible because a zombie has no will of his own. You see them sometimes walking around blindly with dead eyes, following orders, not knowing what they do, not caring.
You mean like Democrats?
Thank you. And now, the patriotic short.
Where the hell did they come from?
Sir, dog and fox pulled back.
What? Leave that alone. God damn it.
Come on! You're going to get me killed, Lieutenant!
Open fire!
Oh, that's too close!
Now fire, McGrath! Fire! Jesus, what was that? German!
Well, hello, Second Armored.
Oh, you beautiful baby! Let's go! Pour it on him! Let him have it! Come on!
About damn time.
And that was the patriotic short. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, a little bit of motivation.
Every day when you get out of bed, life's standing right there to kick you in the face, man. Life is going to throw all kinds of crazy stuff at you. And you have to be ready for it, and you got to deal with it.
Are there going to be some moments when you want to give up? Yes. Will there be some moments when it's going to seem like it's impossible? The pain that you're experiencing, the disappointment that you're experiencing, that you're going to say, it's not worth it? Yes, that's going to be right there for you. It's going to be in your face, telling you to go back. You're going to start listening to the buts, and buts will have all kind of help and support from your family members and friends saying, I told you, fool. You're going under this positive thinking stuff. Look at you now. Bet you wish you had that job now.
When you have a dream, that dream will always be tested. The pressure in your life right now has a purpose. It's not crushing you. It's pushing what's on the inside of you don't. It shows you who you really are.
Don't never let anybody take your belief in yourself away from you because they hurting inside. Don't you never let nobody do that. Always believe in who you are in your darkest moments, man. In the darkest moments, when you at that pain, when you at the bottom, know that you're going to get back up. But you got to believe that you're going to get back up. I don't care how hard you fall on your back. Because if you can fall on your back, you can look up. And if you can look up, you can get up. You can get through this. Because you're bigger than this. And when you get to the other side, you're going to be better. You're going to be bigger. You're going to be bolder. But we got to get through this. And I'm saying that the fact that you're still here, that you're still breathing, you've got some more work. And you owe it to yourself. So when you get up in the morning, that you can look yourself in the face and say, hey, I'm living my life on my terms. That's important. Not to give up on your dream, not to give up on yourself. Don't get it twisted. E.T. get tempted just like everybody else. But where I come from, everybody don't get this shot. I invested too much to quit. I made too many sacrifices to give up. Have you lost your mind? You know how hard I worked to get here? I put in too many hours. I sweat too much blood, too much tears. I worked hard to get here. Didn't nobody give me this. No, listen to me. That's why it's so easy for you to quit. Because you ain't paid nothing for it. I paid too much. I didn't grow up with wealth. Didn't nobody pay me. I worked for this. Sweat, blood, tears. I earn every dime I get. I work for this. And you think I'm about to get this up? You work for this. You put in time. This is not the time to lose your mind. This is the time to go all in. You want me to tell you it's okay to quit? You want me to tell you it's okay to surrender? They may not give it to you. Nobody might take you by the hand and take you there. But what I'm telling you is I did it with my mind and my heart, and I envisioned it. I saw myself when I was still homeless, when I was still a high school dropout. I saw myself one day being where I am right now. I don't care where you are. Use what you got to get what you want. Use your mind. Use your vision. Use your dream. I dream my way out the hood. I dream my way out. And then I would get up every day and I would grind hard. So when life happens, I don't just sit there and cry. I buck back. The darkest hour is just before dawn. So you better not give up. You better not quit. You might be 3 inches from your goal. You might be 3 yards from your goal. You might be 30 yards from your goal. And if you quit now, you give up now, you may never reach your reality. You're not a victim. Stop talking about I can't, I quit, I don't think I can make it happen. It's impossible. Stop talking like that. Stop cursing and start believing. Champions keep going when they don't have anything left in their tank. When they don't have no more. When it's over. When they're tired. When they're frustrated. When they're ready to give up. When they spent their last dime. It's when you have nothing left. It's when you depleted all your money. When all your energy goes. When you have nothing left. That's when it's showtime.
Things are going to get harder and things are going to get tougher. So what you've got to do is you have to get harder and you have to get tougher. Become stronger than the things you're up against. That's how you win.
I wish I could tell you that if you just keep going, it's going to get easier. I wish I could tell you that, but that's not the truth. The truth is you got to find something within. You got to find something within, and that's got to push you, and that's got to elevate you, and that's got to drive you. E.T., aren't you tired? Yes, but I can't quit. I can't stop. I can't get tired. I can't give up. I can't give in. My mama counting on me. My wife is counting on me. When you ain't got nothing left in your tank, you got to think about the people in your life that you're doing this for. And then if you can think about them, you can go one more mile. You can go one more day at work.
You go after and you give it all you have. If you lose, at least you tried, man. I failed. It's 10 times more of a man than someone said, what if? Because what if never went to the arena.
The person who didn't try should feel rejected. The person that didn't try should feel defeated. I tried. I put my best foot forward. I don't feel bad. I gave it 120%. You can't never feel bad when you put forth 120%. You can't let the outcome make you feel whack. I'm not whack. I'm a warrior. I'm not whack. You know how much I went through to make that thing happen? You know how many obstacles I had to get through to make that work? I got through all of them. But I don't feel bad that it didn't work out. I'm a problem solver. I'm not soft. I'm not weak. I don't quit. I don't give up. I don't surrender. I don't always win, but I always try.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Daily Stoic.
When good men do nothing. Often, injustice lies in what you aren't doing, not only in what you are doing. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 9.5. History abounds with evidence that humanity is capable of doing evil, not only actively but passively. In some of our most shameful moments, from slavery to the Holocaust to segregation to the murder of Kitty Genovese, guilt wasn't limited to perpetrators, but to ordinary citizens who, for a multitude of reasons, declined to get involved. It's that old line, all evil needs to prevail is for good men to do nothing. It's not enough to just not do evil. You must also be a force for good in the world, as best you can.
And that was the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. Thank you. And now, The Exorcist.
Satan basically told me every time he gets someone to fall, there's a sadistic delight he gets out of it. He, uses his power against the other angels in an evil way. There's a gradual increase in his suffering. And that's what hell is. Hell is not static. It's an eternal increase in suffering. It never ends. Just as in heaven, there's this constant, ever-increasing delight in all the different things that you see about God, because it'll take an eternity to reveal it all to us. Okay. So this small one, he said to me, I was the angel that was created to head the hierarchy of angels that was created for Our Lady. And at one point, I said, apologize to all of them for falling. He says, that's going to take a while. And I'm like, what do you mean? He says, there's an awful lot of them. But it basically means if she's going to be queen, well, God's going to create angels to be her servants.
And that was The Exorcist. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, when I say capitalism, I mean a full, pure, uncontrolled, unregulated, laissez-faire capitalism with a separation of state and economics in the same way and for the same reasons as the separation of state and church. A pure system of capitalism has never yet existed, not even in America. Capitalism is not the system of the past. It is the system of the future, if mankind is to have a future. Unquote. And that was Ayn Rand from the chapter The Objectivist Ethics from the book The Virtue of Selfishness. Back in a minute. Thank you. First Maria, then Stu.
Welcome back. 30 minutes before the opening bell sounds for a Friday. We are ending the week on a strong note. Dow Industrial's up 275 right now. Let's get some final thoughts right here. Mario Veneroso.
Yes, absolutely. So brighter days are ahead. We're cutting costs. We're improving America. We're getting $8.5 million programs out the window, feudal programs for transgender mice, and corrections, equal opportunities. So we're ending the week strong.
All right, Ashley.
I'm watching today to see what Democrats are going to vote for to avoid the shutdown, number one, because I think that's going to be a key moving into the next 2 years. And also what the new Prime Minister of Canada is going to say and how that will impact tariffs moving
good
forward.
Point. Cheryl.
We're going to get retail sales actually on Monday, Maria. So I think we're going to get another window into how the consumer is doing and how they're feeling. The data is really, it's been market moving as we saw this week with CPI, Maria.
All right, great panel. Thank you so much. Ashley Davis, Mario Veneroso, and Cheryl Casone. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you tonight on Maria Bartiromo's Wall Street and Sunday Morning Futures on Fox News on Sunday. Varney and Company picks it up. Stu, take it away.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. Dramatic news on politics and money. That, of course, is our bread and butter. First, a big win for President Trump. Senator Schumer has reversed himself. He has caved. He will vote for the Republican spending plan. He will not shut the government down. The market's rallying. We've had a rough week, but so far this Friday, stocks are solidly higher. Perhaps Schumer's retreat has something to do with it. The Dow up maybe 260, the Nasdaq up about 230 points. As for Bitcoin, you're in the mid-$80 range, 83,447 right now. Gold, though, check this out, hitting a record. It's now just above $3,000 an ounce. Interest rates, little changed. The 10-year yield's right there at 4.3%. The 2-year still below 4%. Politics. This afternoon, 3:15 Eastern, President Trump goes to the Justice Department and delivers a law and order speech. Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt joins us shortly. I'll ask her what the president's going to say. A second judge has now ordered the administration to reinstate immediately tens of thousands of federal workers. The White House says this is an attempt to unconstitutionally seize the power of hiring and firing from the executive branch, end quote. The administration will, quote, immediately fight back. On the show today, the Democrats playing with fire. Violence against Tesla dealerships, violent speech from pro-Hamas demonstrators who took over Trump Tower. How long before violence against property spills over to violence against people? And what I'm calling the end of an era. Nancy Pelosi fades from the limelight. Bernie Sanders delivers a socialist message that is so yesterday. Joe Biden left the building, and now Schumer caves to the Republicans. It is Friday, March 14th, 2025. Varney and Company is about to begin.
And that was Maria and Stu. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now another quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, perhaps one of his most famous quotes. Quote, "Battle not with monsters, lest you become a monster. And if you gaze into the abyss gazes into you." Unquote. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the last few paragraphs of an article in the Washington Examiner. Conservatives are seizing the means of cultural production. Maybe we ceded the culture because ceding ground to the left was the right's favorite hobby for many years. When people would wonder why the right doesn't march in the streets like the left does, because we have jobs and families, and the losers on the left don't. They've got nowhere to be during the day, so they might as well loot a few stores and burn down a few buildings. Besides, if you go too far, you end up in solitary confinement for 20 years because you sat at Nancy Pelosi's desk for 5 minutes. Overt political actions don't really come naturally to someone who has more conservative tendencies, and neither do overt creative endeavors. There aren't a lot of right-wing parents who are going to encourage their children to follow their dreams and become poets or playwrights. In this economy, after paying for college, you better go out and get a job, son. You can write your limericks and do your little doodles on your own time. The most important rule of making new culture and art, whatever it is this. The product itself doesn't have to be an explicitly political project that is right-wing or conservative. In fact, it shouldn't be. Instead, it should be simply the truthful, beautiful, enlightening, and lasting product. Art in general should reject politics if it wants to have a real and lasting impact. You can't create new classics if they are riddled with the political trends of the current moment. Only by rejecting political whims can any art not immediately become obsolete. Therefore, it is not about creating right-wing art. Instead, it's about unleashing the talents of right-wing or even politically neutral artists and creators. Instead of nurturing artists as activists, we need to nurture artists as artists. Any artistic renewal should not just be to please core audiences. It should be also to identify creative talent and nurture it before it is lost, before people give up. It's not just about championing excellence, it's also about championing our people. Now that the means of cultural production have been officially seized, it's time for us to replant our fallow fields with seeds that will grow robust crops of talent and Untold Cultural Riches. And that's an article written by Peachy Keenan, who's a writer and a mother in L.A. But what she misses here, well, almost completely, she has a little segment in here where should simply be truthful, beautiful, enlightening, and lasting. That's correct. But the rest of it is, she misses the point, which conservatives have a tendency to do. The point is, and that's why I'm the only true conservative in the United States today, is because I don't miss the point. The whole point of art for the left is to use it as, and culture is to use it as a way of furthering their revolutionary ambitions. So they want to subvert art and use it for subversive purposes. And the way they do that is by art is supposed to be something beautiful, and that's where it's going to be of lasting value that she's talking about. But the left wants to create ugliness and do so as a source of friction, cultural friction, so that it will then lead to some kind of socialist revolution. And if we're going to go ahead and take control of the culture in this country, one of the things that we have to do is to emphasize beauty. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Stuart Varney.
Now this. It is unusual to see a politician like Senator Schumer fall into a political trap, but that's what just happened. He will not shut the government down. He will vote for the Republican spending bill. He was somber and subdued when he made his statement on the Senate floor. He'd been outmaneuvered. He knew that if he shut the government down, the Democrats would get the blame. Now, Schumer, the master politician, had always managed to put the blame on the Republicans in previous shutdowns. Tables turned this time. But there's something else in play. As the senator himself said, if there was a shutdown, President Trump would have full authority to run the government as he pleased, vastly increasing his power. Well, he couldn't have that. Bite the bullet and vote with the Republicans. This is happening throughout the aging Democrat leadership. Nancy Pelosi is a talented politician who is now fading from the limelight. She's taking heat for waiting so long to ease Joe Biden out of the presidential race. The left holds her partly responsible for Trump's win last November. Pelosi is 84. Bernie Sanders is 83. Okay, still going strong, but his socialist message is just so yesterday. Joe Biden, he's 82. He has left the building. As they leave the scene, a thoroughly divided, leaderless party is left behind. AOC says Schumer's decision not to shut the government down is devastating, a betrayal, and an outrage. Reportedly, there are numerous Democrats who want her to primary Senator Schumer, who is 74. It is the end of an era.
And that was Stuart Varney. Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now we pick up where we left off with 3,000 degrees.
12. Mike McNamee was in the stairwell on the landing outside the door to the third floor when the third alarm was struck. He didn't make the call. The deputy chief, Jack Fenton, did. Anytime a fire went to 2 alarms, a deputy chief, one rank above a district chief like McNamee, was sent to the scene to assume full command. At that point, McNamee took over the Interior Command, which, since the battle against Worcester Cold Storage was being fought only inside, still left him essentially in charge. He was relieved to hear the call for more men. The moments lost on the third floor, staring at identical doors, had rattled him. Fire alarm hadn't found any information on the building, floor plans or lists of hazardous chemicals that might be stored inside. There was too much he didn't know about the building, too many odd corridors and dark caverns. His men had the fire corralled on the second floor, just beyond the firewall. Engines 1, 12, and 6, and ladders 1 and 5 were attacking from the A side, and guys from engines 13 and 16 had 2 hoses running up the C stairs. But they'd been at it for a while, almost 20 minutes, in an oven. Fresh reserves wouldn't hurt. The third alarm would bring 12 men on 2 engines and a ladder. He looked around the stairwell, his eyes already adjusted to the shades of black and gray. The railing was a wide line of ink, ruler straight, angling up against the charcoal walls. The spot from his flashlight caught certain shapes, through shadows that bled into the gloom. The walls muffled the sounds of a firefight, the rough hiss of the flames, the dull thud of boots pounding on the steps below, the clank of tools banging against metal. He listened for a moment, alone on the stairs. Everything sounded normal. Every man was doing his job. We can still get this, he thought. Mike turned toward the stairs, started to climb to the floor above. His boot found the first step with a rubbery thud. Mike raised his other foot, saw the metal tread of the stairs beneath him. Then, it was gone. In a heartbeat, the stairwell went black. His foot, the steps, the railing, his hand held less than an inch from his face. Everything disappeared into a viscous cloud. The smoke had dropped from above, but in an instant, making it seem like it came from everywhere at once, as if every molecule of air had spontaneously alchemized into dark poison. There had been no warning, no bang or pop or rumble above the roar of the fire, just an immediate plunge into darkness. Mike was caught off guard, his mask still clipped to his coat. The first breath seared his throat, and his eyes began to water, tears trying to wash away the sting.
I want everyone on the upper floors down to the ground, now,
he hollered up the stairs.
And I want head counts. I want everyone accounted for.
He felt for the radio mic, squinting against the smoke, yelled the same order over the air, but missed the talk button. It never broadcast, but it didn't matter. From above, Mike could hear boots pounding down the stairs. His men would regroup on the first floor, adjust their attack. He snapped his mask into place, drew in a gulp of fresh air. The smoke was still blinding, but the plastic kept it out of his eyes. He grabbed a railing in the dark and started down, banging his heels against the risers to find each step. 27 years on the job, and he'd never witnessed so awful a transformation, a building deteriorating that far, that fast. He wondered if one of the upper floors had flashed, if hot gases had flooded rooms coated with cork and polystyrene, superheating the walls until they ignited. There was so much smoke, banking down so fast, pouring through hallways into the stairwell, a force seeming to overwhelm physics, a boiling mist descending, collapsing on the floors below. It took Mike almost 15 seconds to climb down 3 floors. The door on the ground floor was tucked behind a half wall, same as on the 3rd floor, practically hidden. He'd remembered how many flights he'd gone up, knew where to break hard right to get out. In the foyer, just inside the loading dock, he pulled off his mask, coughed the smoke from his throat, gulped fresh air. He was bewildered, stunned at how rapidly the stairwell had darkened, but he didn't dwell on it. No point and no time. The fire had made a tactical maneuver, ambushed him. Now he had to counter. First, he had to get the smoke out of the building, open more holes, give the cloud a way into the open sky. He went outside, looked up the side of the building. A series of arches were framed into one wall, old windows along the stairwell that had been covered with plywood. He grabbed his radio. Command to Scope 2. Scope 2.
Can you set up behind Engine 1 and underneath Ladder 1 and start taking these windows out on the side?
Received. Mike glanced up the wall again. Those boards were meant to seal the building tight. They wouldn't just pop open. His men would be working in a miasma of poison for at least 10 more minutes. He keyed his microphone again.
Interior, fire alarm.
Fire alarm answering interior.
Notify the shop we're going to need some air at the scene.
Interior? Say again? Damned radios. Even when no one stepped on the transmission, hit his talk button in the middle of someone else's sentence, or had his microphone short out when it got splashed with water, messages still got garbled. It required a practiced ear and steady concentration to decipher the words, separate them from the background noise.
We're going to need air, Mike said again. Notify the shop. We're going to need resupply for our air.
I have that. Mike paced outside, studied the building, reconsidered everything he knew so far. There had been a report of homeless people living inside, but that had been 20 minutes ago, long enough for his men to search the building. They'd found evidence that someone was squatting there, the garbage and the waste, but no people. The tramps were out, had to be by now. The actual fire, meanwhile, was isolated but ferocious. Judging by the smoke, the density, and the speed with which it had hemorrhaged into the stairs, the flames were exceptionally hot, generating more heat than could escape through the vent on the roof. And the building was dangerous, cagey. It had fooled Mike, confused him with its identical doors and twisting passages, even before it flooded black. Now his men were working blind, trying to feel their way through a furnace. He considered ordering everyone out. His men could fall back into a defensive perimeter, line up the hoses, blast away from a safe distance, surround and drown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was effective, guaranteed a victory. Worcester firemen always won, too. The whole building might burn to the ground, but the fire always went out, and everyone always went home. Sirens whined in the middle distance, coming closer, louder with every whoop. The third alarm companies. John Sullivan tried to raise Mike on the radio. No answer. Again. No answer. The third call caught Mike's attention, grabbed him through the chaos of the fire. "Engine 3, he said into his radio. He could see the truck's lights flashing under the interstate. "Just hold tight there. Stage." He wasn't sure where to send them yet. Another minute, maybe 2, and he'd have to reposition all the men on the street. The engines were pumping 1,000 gallons a minute into the massive flames just beyond the firewall. Robert A. watched it all disappear, swallowed into the orange, almost as if the fire was separating the droplets, feeding on the hydrogen and oxygen. "This is like pissing into a furnace," he muttered to himself. Lieutenant Robin Heward from Engine 12 was next to him, manning a 2.5-inch. Robin was 53, but tougher than most guys half his age. Pumped iron for 2 hours every day. After almost 20 years on the job, he'd gotten hurt only once, when the harness of his air tank snagged on a latch in the truck. He tried yanking it free, but the harness was stronger than the ligaments holding his arm into the socket. Engine 12 had responded on the first alarm. 18 minutes later, at 6:31, Robin was dragging hose up to the second floor. He ran into Bobby Mansfield, a ladder man out of the same station, coming down the stairs. Bob had been part of the initial crews on the roof, watched Paul Brotherton and Jerry Lucy clean out the skylight. With the job on the roof accomplished, he moved downstairs with the rest of the men. The 2 guys from Rescue 1, Paul and Jerry, had turned into the top floor to check for the homeless people and any extension of the fire. Everyone else went lower to help with the attack. Bobby and Robin got the line into position, and at 6:33, Robin radioed the order for his men on the truck to charge the line, arm them against the squalling flames. That was his favorite part, going into combat. And that's what it was, too, combat. He'd fought the Viet Cong 30 years earlier, 101st Airborne, a screaming eagle, drafted into the same branch of the Army that Tim Jackson had signed on with. The principle had been the same. The enemy wanted to take his territory, kill him if they had to, and he wanted to take out the enemy. It was exhilarating. Danger was funny that way. Except Hamburger Hill, 8 endless days neck-deep in mud, dodging shrapnel and mortar shells. He'd never needed 8 days to defeat a fire. The first foray into the flames on the second floor went well, the leading flank collapsing as soon as they hit it. The small room they were in blacked out. Usually that means the fire has been cooled, orange light replaced by smoke, but they could still hear the popping and snapping of a roaring blaze. "Robin, this ain't right," Bobby said. "Can you hear it?" "Yeah, and it's got heat," Robin said. "I can feel it on my neck." He paused. "Something's not right here. Something's going on that I don't understand." He thought of Tina. They'd been married 25 years, raised 2 kids, built a big house on a lake just outside of town, filled it with antiques he collected. Tina was a nurse, tacked scraps of paper to the kitchen wall with affirmations printed on them like, "Pain is inevitable, suffering is negotiable." She knew he was smart, careful, competent. Still, she would remind him sometimes, "Don't be a hero." He and Bobby kept washing the walls, studying the room. The smoke was thickening, banking down. Air was rushing into the fire, hot gusts biting into his neck. It felt like wind. That wasn't good. Robin realized he'd lost track of time, that he'd lost his bearings. That was worse. He reassessed the battle. "There are no windows," he told himself. You don't know where the staircase is, and you don't know how much air you have left. He felt a shudder of fear. You're gonna get trapped in here. You're gonna die in here. You gotta get out. Robin leaned close to Bobby, who was on the nozzle. Drop the line, he yelled. We're out of here. Bobby kept spraying. Firemen were reluctant to retreat, back down from the enemy. Drop the line, Robin hollered again. Bobby took a step backward, but kept the nozzle open. Drop the fucking line, Robin screamed at him. We're getting out of here, now! Bobby slammed the valve shut, let the hose fall to the floor, turned for the doorway, following the hose back out. Robin was behind him. Something caught his leg, wrapped around it, pulled him down. The wires that had fallen from the ceiling. Another wave of smoke banked down, darkening Robin's vision. He clawed at the wires, knew he was running out of time. A pair of hands broke through the clouds. Steve Adams, one of the men working his truck that night, was on his knees next to the lieutenant, pulling away the wires. He got Robin untangled. Robin rolled onto his knees, found the hose on the floor, and started to crawl. No, it's this way, Steve yelled over the roar. He was pointing into a black maw. Robin looked at him, unsure what to do. Steve, he said, trying to steady his breathing, you gotta be positive. You gotta be absolutely positive, or we're gonna get lost in here. I'm positive, Steve said. It's 25 feet, right there. Robin took a deep breath, nodded. He stayed close to Steve, the two of them moving as fast as their knees would scrape against the floor. 25 feet seemed like a mile. But then they were out on the stairs on the seaside. Steve scrambled down. Robin turned around, went back into the darkness. He went to the edge of the vestibule, his radio in one hand, his thumb on the talk button. Engine 12 to any firefighters in the second floor area. Get out to the staircase. Get out to the staircase. He released the button and screamed, This way out! It's this way! He didn't know if anyone heard him, if anyone was still floundering in the dark. His mask vibrated against his face, a soft jackhammer warning him he was running out of air. He yelled once more, then wheeled around, hustling back to the stairs. He got to his feet, rushing now, hitting the treads on instinct, not bothering to feel for them. The fire growled behind him, his pulse pounded in his skull, his breath rasped behind the mask, all of it churning into a chaotic roar. The mask cleaved to Robin's face as his boot hit the bottom step. He'd drawn the last breath, emptied the tank. It sucked back like a vacuum pulling on his lungs. He never broke stride as he reached for the mask, ripped it off, gasping acrid air, and sprinting outside. 60 feet above the pavement where Robin was wheezing, Jerry Lucy felt for his radio in the darkness. Rescue 600 to command, he said. We need help. On the floor below the top floor of the building. We're lost. No one answered. Paul Brotherton was next to him, the two of them on their hands and knees, keeping low, trying to get beneath the smoke. It was impossible. Everything was greasy black. They couldn't see each other, let alone the way out. Jerry wasn't too worried, though. Not yet. He'd been here before, lost in a cauldron, wondering if he'd get to fresh air. He always did. Like that time in a triple-decker, the whole back end shrouded by a sheet of fire. Jerry looking for the stairs, going the wrong way, walking into the flames. One of the local Sparkies took a picture of him from below. Jerry, nothing more than a smudge in a wash of orange. He framed the picture, hung it in his basement rec room next to the Gottlieb Rescue 911 pinball machine, and above the stuffed Dalmatian, and opposite the Backdraft poster. Hell of a movie, Backdraft. Jerry had watched it more times than he could count. But Hollywood could never get the fire scenes right. In the movies, a burning warehouse was all orange light and bright flashes. That is so fake, he'd tell Michelle. If they really showed what it was like, the screen would be black. If only he had a rope. Jerry thought every man, especially rescue guys, should carry a length of fireproof rope. A leader he could tie off where he came in, mark his trail. His would have been knotted to the door by the B stairwell, all the way across the warehouse. After they left the roof, he and Paul had swept the top level. From the top of the stairs, they moved quickly through 2 storerooms off the vestibule, then went into the main chamber. It was the same as on the lower floors, 88 feet wide and 50 feet deep, bounded on the far end by a brick firewall. They passed through that into a slightly smaller room, then turned left toward the seaside elevator shaft. They were able to get around the smoke and embers blowing up toward the vent, move around to the backside of the shaft, explore the whole floor. They saw nothing that alarmed them. With the top floor clear, they backtracked to the stairs on the B wall. They had no choice. The stairwell next to the C elevator, the one Robin Hewitt had escaped through, went only to the third floor. Above that level, there was only one way up or down. Jerry concentrated on his breathing, kept it slow, measured. The temperature was rising, 200 degrees, maybe 220. He'd expanded the air in his tank, made it seem thinner, made each breath seem shallow. If a man wasn't careful, he'd pant through the last few pounds in short, gasping moments. He retraced their path again in his head. They'd taken roughly the same route as they had on the floor above, across the chamber, through the firewall, around one room, left through the elevator shaft. They were in the back corner behind the shaft when the lights went out. All that smoke pouring in from everywhere at once. It smothered everything, even the beams from their flashlights. He and Paul had tried following the walls, feel a path back out to the stairs, but they'd only gone in circles. Above him, chest high if he'd been standing, Jerry could feel a narrow ledge like the sill of a window, but he couldn't put his hand through it. Paul's alarm went off, his mask rattling against his face. He had 3 minutes of air left, 4 if he was lucky. 55 seconds had passed since Jerry had called for help, and still no answer. They could hear Jack Fenton, the deputy chief, calling the third alarm companies, telling them to get to the second floor, relieve the men on the hoses. Jerry's transmission must have gotten lost in the chatter and the static. He keyed the microphone again. "Rescue to command! Rescue to command!" He measured each word, not wasting oxygen. "We need help on the 4th floor. 1 floor down. We're running out of air." 15 seconds ticked by. Then Mike McNamee's voice. "Last message. Can you repeat? Last message?" Other voices clicked on immediately after Mike, jamming the airwaves. Robert A. "Engine 1 to command. Get everybody out of the 2nd floor. Back them out." Jack Fenton. "Command to fire alarm." Fire alarm answering. 22 more seconds gone. Paul pushed his talk button. "Fire alarm! Fire alarm! Emergency! Emergency! Clear the air! Clear the air! Emergency!" On the floors below them, dozens of men felt a spasm of dread. What they heard, what they would later swear they heard, was Mayday, Mayday. Perhaps the syllables had been distorted by the background noise and the sketchy frequency. Or maybe it was Paul's tone, urgent and almost bewildered, and every other man's nerves that twisted one word into the other. Whatever the reason, they would remember it, be haunted by it, because they knew how frightened Paul must have been. Firemen were loath to speak that word, Mayday, ashamed to call for help, to admit that the heat and the smoke and the flames might be tougher than they were. Men called Mayday only before they died, or when they believed they would. 2 more broadcasts followed in quick succession. First, Jerry. "I have an emergency." Then Paul. "Command, we are 2 floors down from the roof," he said. "This is the rescue company. Come now, come now." The transmissions were breaking up, chopped by fragments of static and the background drone of the fire. "Okay," Mike answered. "Where are you? Where are you?" 2 floors down from the roof." Mike got on the radio. "All companies, we have an emergency. Somebody is 2 floors down from the roof." "Guys, we're..." A different voice, Jerry. "Not the top floor. 1 floor down." Mike broadcast again. "What is your emergency?" Fire alarm answered, clear and distinct, so every man could hear it. "Running out of air." "Command to engine 3. Lieutenant John Sullivan heard Mike McNamee call his truck. He punched his radio. "Engine 3. Come up to the side of the building," Mike told him. He kept the message short, clipped, not wasting time or breath. Mike had blocked out all emotion, distilled the operation to a tactical chore. He had 2 men, his men, lost in the black mist above, frightened and choking, and probably dying. Mike couldn't afford to be afraid. No one below the 5th floor could. Sully didn't bother answering, just started moving. Instinct took over. There wasn't much in the manuals about moments like this, 2 men missing. There didn't have to be. When one man is in trouble, every other man goes after him. He called back over his shoulder.
Jay, shut it down. You're coming in. You take Joe. I'll take Mark and Doug.
Jay Lyons nodded, jumped down from the cab. At most fires, the driver usually stayed with the truck, ran the pumps, and fed the lines. He was also the only man not fully dressed for battle. A man couldn't drive a fire truck very well if he'd had a tank of air strapped to his back. Jay reached for a harness, slipped his shoulders through it, shrugged, rolled the air bottle into position between his shoulder blades. Joe McGurk watched Sully and the others run toward the warehouse while Jay put on his gear. Joe was eager, excited, desperate to get inside. He'd never been in a big one before, never seen enough fire for everyone. The worst danger Joe had faced on the job was a medical run when an overdosed junkie puked all over him, splashed vomit in his eyes. He had to worry for a couple of weeks that he might have been infected with hepatitis. Nothing heroic about that. This is what he'd waited for. The mission that was born into him, the stuff of lore and legend. He was a real fireman going to save real lives, his brothers' lives. He was relieved Sully had left him with Jay. Of the two, Joe would probably see more action with Jay. He always wondered if Sully was too timid. Those times Sully had let slower trucks overtake Engine 3, let other men jump into the flames. Sure, it was protocol, Engine 3 taking its assigned spot as second due. Joe understood that. But he still suspected that maybe Sully wasn't as eager to jump into the flames as some of the other guys. Guys like Jay. Jay was aggressive, a warrior. Ballsy, like Sully said. Joe wanted to be ballsy, too. Once Jay made lieutenant, maybe he'd get assigned to a ladder truck, and maybe he'd take Joe with him. Joe hoped he would. Jay fastened the clasps on his coat, double-checked his harness, made sure his mask was clipped to his shoulder. He felt for his medallion, St. Florian, on a silver chain around his neck, similar to Tom Spencer's. Around the saint's image were 4 words stamped in relief. St. Florian, protect us. Jay looked at Joe. He saw Joe's jaws set firm, his teeth clenched. But there was a shine to his eyes. You ready? He asked Joe. Joe nodded. He realized he wasn't afraid. Let's do it. The two of them broke into a light jog, the warehouse looming above them, rising with perspective until it overtook everything, filled their entire vision. A smoking hulk splashed with the red and white of the fire truck's lights. Mike shook off the fear that stirred in his belly. Paul had called Mayday. He was sure of it, and he was terrified by it. Or would have been if he dwelled on it. He couldn't afford that. Paul and Jerry couldn't afford that. Finding them would be impossible if Mike couldn't figure out where they were, at least which floor. Paul had said 2 down from the roof, but that wouldn't do the men starting to search from the bottom much good if they didn't know how many levels the warehouse had. Mike sprinted outside, faced the building, craned his neck toward the sky. He studied the facade, pored over it for a clue. A break in the pattern of bricks, the weathered arch of an old window, anything that might tell him where Paul and Jerry were lost. He checked one wall, darted around the back, then back to the front. Nothing. Worcester Cold Storage wasn't giving up any of its secrets. Mike hurried back to the stairs at the same time the third alarm companies were storming the building. He decided to post himself in the stairwell so he could keep track of everyone who went up and who came safely down. He saw John Sullivan coming with 2 of his men.
Sully, we need more bottles, he said. Can you get us more air?
Sully and his men went back outside onto Arctic Street to find a truck with a spare stash of air tanks. As they left, Tom Spencer and 2 of his men, Tim Jackson and Paul Brosnahan, clambered over the loading dock and into the foyer. Mike noticed the look on Tim's face, which was unusual because it betrayed nothing. No fear, no anxiety, just a quiet determination. The countenance of a man who accepted that he signed on for a job that might actually require him to get hurt. Mike thought Tim must have been a hell of a soldier. He turned to Lieutenant Spencer.
All right, Tommy. I need you to go to the 5th floor, he said. Stay on the ropes, stay together, and leave before your low air alarm goes off.
Tom nodded as he tightened his mask around his face. Mike caught his eyes, looked hard into them for a moment. 3 curious facts flashed through his mind. Patrick, Casey, Daniel. Tom's kids. He knew all their names, how old they were. He was sending their father into a poisoned void. Tom held the gaze, but only for an instant. His mask secure, he brushed by Mike and disappeared into the cloud, Brosnahan and Tim following hard behind him. He heard Dave Halverson, Rescue 1's lieutenant, on the radio. Rescue to Paul Brotherton. A pause. Rescue 1 to Rescue 600. Yeah, go ahead, Paul said. Go ahead. 600, what's your location? Dave was cool, almost formal, using Paul's call sign. 2 floors down from the roof. 2 floors down from the roof. Please hurry. Paul was pleading. Time was burning away. Rescue to Rescue 600. Go, yeah. It was Jerry again. They were taking turns on the radio. Dave didn't recognize the voice, couldn't tell it was a different man. You all right, Paul? You all set? We need air. We need air. We're sharing a tank right now, off of me. Paul, if you need air, come on down. Come down. Paul answered next, gave the mask to Jerry. We're lost, Dave, he said. You gotta send a rescue team up here for us. He sounded perplexed. Not desperate yet, but confused, baffled. What floor? Dave asked. What floor? 2nd floor down from the roof. 2 floors down, I think. Jerry gave the tank to Paul, barked into his own radio. We were on the roof, and then we checked the next floor down, he said. Now we are on the next one. Hurry. 40 seconds later, he pushed the talk button again. Get up here, please. It was 6:52. Paul and Jerry had been lost for at least 6 minutes. Longer, probably, considering Jerry broadcast their initial call for help at 6:46. One air tank was already drained, and the second couldn't have more than another handful of breaths left in it. After that, they would be forced to pull the mask away or die gasping. Once it was off, though, the only thing left to breathe would be smoke, a venomous mix of carbon monoxide, and depending on what was burning, several hundred or several thousand toxic chemicals. Hydrogen cyanide and hydrochloric acid were probably in the vapor, and the asphalt and polystyrene on the walls were the industrial equivalent of napalm, petroleum byproducts superheated into a poison mist. They were already woozy from the carbon monoxide, maybe already crippled, their muscles paralyzed. A heavy concentration reduced a man to a paralytic stupor in 5 breaths, the CO bonding to the red blood cells, starving the body of oxygen. The brain, trying to save itself, would shut down the least important tissues, everything except itself, the heart, and the lungs. That's why firemen were always finding civilians unconscious next to doors and windows, overwhelmed by carbon monoxide, one desperate lunge from safety. While the CO was shutting down their bodies, the other toxins were destroying their airways. The smoke particles would have irritated their bronchial tubes and lung tissues at room temperature. Superheated, they scorched the deepest parts of Paul's and Jerry's chests, burning all the way into the tiniest air sacs. Their throats were closing, swelling shut from the trauma, the same way a finger swelled if it was slammed in a door. But there wouldn't be much pain. The CO would knock them out before it hurt too badly. Jack Fenton struck a 4th alarm immediately after Jerry's transmission. 2 more engines, 1 more ladder, 9 more men. Mike had 3 teams working up the stairs, 3 at the bottom waiting to take their place. Then another message from Paul, frantic now. Fire alarm! We have a second emergency here, he said. Get people up on this floor now, or we are going to die. We have no air, and we cannot breathe. What floor are you on? Fire alarm radioed back. What floor are you on? We don't know, Paul said, his voice weaker now. We don't know. We are on a wall. We have no air. Please.
And that was the end of Chapter 12 of 3,000 Degrees, the true story of a deadly fire and the men who fought it, by Sean Flynn. Back in a minute. Thank you, and this is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that materialism is a concept.